Hi there. Have you been confused by all the information that is available about nutrition? Have you ever thought to yourself, I want to be healthy, but I don't know how in this crazy world? If so, you're in the right place to learn everything you need to know about how you can be your healthiest self by improving your digestion. We'll learn how to make the easiest and healthiest sourdough bread to the truth about yeast and sugar. Join me each week and we'll talk about everything from junk food to your protein needs. We will even dive into some unspoken topics like, what is my bowel movement trying to tell me? Or how can my emotions possibly affect my digestion? For more information on how to be your healthiest self, visit us on healthyselfwithfood.com, where we provide resources including recipes, cooking classes, and coaching appointments. I believe to completely take care of your whole self, that it includes what you put on your body. So I'm very happy to introduce you to our amazing sponsor, Gervine Family Farms, where you can find the best smelling soaps and healing body products on the market. Gervine Family Farms is the home of all natural, real soap and body products that truly heal your skin. Do you regret washing your hands because after you do, your skin is dry and irritated? If so, try the healthiest soap on earth. It is made from coconut oil, essential oil for the smell, and herbs or spices for the soap color. All the ingredients are so healthy for your skin that you could eat them, but please don't eat the soap. It doesn't taste good. There are no fillers, synthetic dyes, fragrances, or low-quality oils. Real soap doesn't strip your skin of all your body's natural oils, thus requiring you to use lotion so that your skin doesn't completely dry out. Save money on lotion by using real soap, and you will never be able to go back to your fake beauty bars that you call soap. Find us at GervineFamilyFarms.com. That is GURVINE FamilyFarms.com. My name is Kaisa. I've always been intrigued about being my healthiest self, even from a very young age. I have been continually studying and testing out all sorts of health options throughout my life. I'm thrilled to be a certified health, life, spiritual, and soul purpose coach, and for the last 10 years, I have enjoyed working as a nutritional counselor in a naturopathic doctor's office. As a nutritional counselor, I guide patients through protocols for their particular health ailment prescribed by their doctor. I also have almost 30 years of experience in making healing food for my 6 children, husband, and friends. This doesn't mean that my food always turned out or tasted good, but they sure were good sports as I learned many tricks and tips that I now can share with you in your food journey. I recently discovered Ayurveda, and I am currently studying to become a digestive specialist. Ayurveda is the knowledge of life. The basic principle of Ayurveda is to prevent and treat illness by maintaining balance in the body. Let's dive into today's topic. Hi, today we're going to be talking about the benefits of choosing organic food, and then we're going to jump into what genetically modified food is. So I'm glad you're here to join us today. There's a lot of questions that come up with these two topics, and there's no real easy answer, but there's a lot of information, and then it really comes down to you choosing what you want to do for you and your family. So let's jump into this awesome information. So there are a lot of benefits to choosing organic food. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into all these different areas. The first one is that it is better for your health. A review of 41 studies indicates that organic crops provide substantially higher levels of nutrients such as protein, vitamin C, iron, magnesium, and phosphorus. These minerals boost your immune system, they give you energy, and they make your food taste better. The next category is that it protects future generations. The average child receives 4 times more exposure than an adult to at least 8 widely used cancer-causing pesticides in food. The food choices you make now will impact your child's health in the future. It prevents soil erosion, and soil is the foundation of the food chain in organic farming. In conventional farming, the soil is used more as a medium for holding plants in a vertical position so they can be chemically fertilized. As a result, American farms are suffering from the worst soil erosion in history. It protects water quality. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, estimates that pesticides, some carcinogenic, contaminate the groundwater in 38 states, polluting the primary source of drinking water for more than half of the American population. It saves energy. Modern farming uses more petroleum than any other single industry, consuming 12% of America's total energy supply. More energy than before is now used to produce synthetic fertilizers to till, cultivate, and harvest all the crops in the U.S. Organic farming is still mainly based on labor intensive practices such as weeding by hand and using green manures and crop covers rather than synthetic fertilizers to build up the soil. The next category is it keeps chemicals off your plate. The EPA considers 60% of all herbicides, 90% of all fungicides, and 30% of all insecticides to be carcinogenic. Pesticides are poisons designed to kill living organisms and can also be harmful to humans. In addition to potentially causing cancer, pesticides have been implicated in birth defects, nerve damage, and genetic mutation. Organic farming also protects farm workers' health. A National Cancer Institute study found that farmers exposed to herbicides had a 6 times greater risk than non farmers of contracting cancer. Field workers suffer the highest rates of occupational illnesses in California. It also helps small farmers. It's estimated that the United States has lost more than 650,000 family farms in the past decade. Organic farming could be one of the few survival tactics left for family farms. It supports a true economy. Although organic foods might seem more expensive than conventional food prices do not reflect hidden cost borne by taxpayers, including nearly 74 billion in federal subsidies in 1988. Other hidden costs include pesticide regulation and testing, hazardous waste disposal and cleanup, and environmental damage. It promotes biodiversity. Monocropping is the unnatural practice of planting the same single crop, usually corn, soybeans, and wheat, on each of their respective plots of land year after year after year. This lack of diversity in crop rotation that occurs naturally in nature greatly deprives soil of its natural minerals and nutrients. So single crops are almost more reliant on pesticides, although some insects have become genetically resistant to certain pesticides. It also increases flavors. There's a good reason why many chefs use organic foods in their recipes. It tastes better. Organic farming is a process, a labor of love that begins with the nourishment of the soil, including the proper caring for the land and respect for the natural timing of the crop's growth for harvesting, and leads to the nourishment of the plant and ultimately our bodies. I can tell you from experience that in our own home garden that is all organic, that we have tasted the difference in all the foods that we've grown, but especially things like tomatoes and broccoli having a lot of extra flavor that you don't taste in the same product you could get in the store. And so I believe there's a lot of truth to the fact that organic foods seem to just have a greater flavor. We use worms and wood chips and natural fertilizers and things that we can make sure that the soil has the right components that it needs to provide our plants the nutrients that they need. And so we feel really good about that because if nothing else, we're hoping that they're getting the nutrients they need to provide our bodies what we're expecting, which I think is part of the testing that they did for organic foods is noticing that there was a decline in the actual nutrients that um, they were noticing in foods that maybe they tested 20 years ago and then they tested today's variety and noticed that there was a difference in what they typically list as the nutrients that you get from this particular food. And they could only contribute that to the soil being degraded and losing those nutrients. And so there's definitely a natural process to um, nature putting those nutrients back into the soil through crop rotation or through companion planting, and things like that that can help the plants not have the damage from bugs or environmental things that traditional farming is leaning on, pesticide and fungicide and herbicide types of practices rather than some of these other natural ways that can achieve the same thing to keep their plants growing strong but without the chemicals. Okay, now we're going to jump into talking about GMO foods, which stands for genetically modified foods, and how to identify those foods. A significant percentage of processed foods purchased today contains some genetically engineered food products. As a result, each day tens of millions of Americans, infants, children, and adults, eat genetically engineered foods without their knowledge. Consumers have no way of knowing what foods are genetically engineered because the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, does not require labeling of these products. What's worse is that the agency also does not require any pre market safety testing of genetically modified foods. The agency's failure to require testing or labeling of genetically modified foods has made millions of consumers into guinea pigs, unknowingly testing the safety of dozens of gene altered food products. The FDA, in its response to a lawsuit filed by the Center for Food Safety in 1998, admitted in court that it had made no dispositive scientific findings whatsoever about the safety of genetically engineered foods. In other words, the FDA has given the biotech industry the ability to produce and market any number of genetically engineered foods without mandatory agency oversight or safety testing, and without a scientific showing that these foods are safe to consume. So, as of January 2022, the USDA requires food manufacturer to label all foods containing GMO ingredients. So, this is about a year old, still in the process of coming to fruition in our products that we see at the grocery store. And so, to explain this a little bit, even though they're requiring that said, the labels won't say GMO, but instead the term bioengineered food. It will display either as a USDA bioengineered food symbol listed on or near the ingredients, or as a scannable code on the package with directions, such as scan here for more information. So the clue here is that you want to be looking, if you're interested in avoiding products that contain GMO products, you're going to want to look for that bioengineered food label or listing near the ingredients. So it's good to get into a habit of looking at the ingredients on any product you buy, anyways. I've noticed that this was listed on two cereals that are pretty popular on the market. And so just by turning it over, looking at the ingredient label, I could see right under that it said includes bioengineered ingredients. And I was floored. One of them was rice based, and that's not usually one of the products that's as GMO as other. We're going to go over that in a little while. But it was nice to see that at least they made it really obvious. I haven't seen it on all packages. I think a lot of things are probably getting there, but you can also look for some foods may have a third party non GMO project verified label, which indicates that the product contains no GMOs. However, this label is voluntary. I think it's great that there are a lot of products out there that use this non GMO project verified label. And so it makes it easy to identify quickly that it's something that I feel good about buying and feeding to my family. It's also worth noting that any food labeled 100% organic does not contain any GMO ingredients. And this is because US law prohibits this. However, if a product is simply labeled organic, it may contain some GMOs. So you have to be careful about labels that say things like natural, all natural, organic, because it has to be 100% organic, meaning that every single ingredient that was put into that product is not GMO food item. Some of the main crops that are GMO crops that are grown and sold in the United States include corn, soybean, canola, sugar beet, alfalfa, cotton, potatoes, papaya, pink pineapple, summer squash, and a few apple varieties. And this doesn't seem like a super long list, but these are the main things that are basically always GMO foods. So it's important if you're buying something like corn chips, like tortilla chips, that if you want to make sure it's not GMO, it needs to be all organic ingredients that are in there, obviously, especially the corn, because otherwise, if it's not, you can assume that it's a GMO corn. Soybean products are added to a lot, or ingredients, I should say, are added to a lot of products. And sometimes it can be in the form of the oil, the lecithin. You just have to look at the label, and if you see the word soybean and if it's not organic, then you can assume that it's GMO. Corn and soybean are almost always GMO because there's so much of it grown typically for animal feed. And so it's, an easier way to process a lot of food in mass quantities easily, and I guess more cheap. It seems like with all the chemicals and things that they put on stuff and then the work they have to do to try to have the soil work for them by adding more products, it seems like it would be more expensive. But nonetheless, this has been the route that has been chosen to feed animals. So that leads us into another conversation for another day, talking about the quality of meats, because now you're talking about animals eating GMO foods, which means you're getting those as well if you're eating meats from animals that have eaten this type of feed. And the other food was canola, and canola oil is used often in a lot of products as well. So again, unless it's listed organic, you could assume that that's GMO. Sugar beet, so that's something that people consume often in the form of sugar, and so unless it's an organic sugar, it is going to be GMO. We have a whole podcast on sugar, mostly talking about how we consume too much of it. In the future, we'll have one on different forms of sugar so that, we all want to consume something sweet, but it doesn't necessarily have to be one that is really bad for our body in the GMO category, and then as well as the inflammation category, just because that's what sugar does the way that it's processed. Potatoes, unless they're organic, they're going to be GMO. So, um, and the same thing with apples. And there's ways to look on the labels of produce. Something like apples would be a good example where they have the sticker on them and they're going to have certain numbers on them that are going to tell you if it's conventionally farmed or if it's organically farmed. So I'm sure you've all seen the produce labels that will be on an apple that has a barcode. It has a number at the top. That's the PLU. And there are basically three categories at this point. There's the ones that start with 4 in the first part of the number, and that is the code for conventional farming practices. So that's going to mean that it's a non-organic product so that it's going to have, more pesticides or that type of thing on it, but it does not mean that it is GMO. It just means that it's conventionally farmed. The number 9 prefix is the prefix on the PLU for organic farming practices. So those are going to be the ones that are going to have less pesticides as well as be a non-GMO product. And then the prefixes that start with 8 are going to be for genetically engineered foods. And so the number tells you, but it's not something that everybody necessarily knows, but it's nice once you do know it because then you can easily check that when you're shopping and choose the product that you would prefer to be buying. So, now we're going to talk about the 6 potential human health concerns with genetically modified foods. So, genetically engineered foods are different from other foods. And the reason why is because genetic engineering allows for the first time foreign genes, bacterial and viral vectors, viral promoters, and antibiotic marker systems to be engineered into food. These genetic cassettes are now new to the human diet and should be subject to extensive safety testing, which we know hasn't happened. Instead, in 1992, the US Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, ruled without any scientific basis that genetically engineered foods present no different risk than traditional foods. Well, it's been a long time since 1992, and I know for a fact that people are feeling the results of consuming foreign matters in their body, antibiotic markers. I mean, that means that you're ingesting antibiotics through the food that you're eating. And they put those in there to intend for it to protect the food that's growing so that it's not affected by, bugs, rodents, damage just, from it makes the plants more hardy. Like there's good reasons why they wanted to genetically modify things to have all of these bacterial and viral vectors and things, but it's not natural. Our body doesn't know what to do with it when it sees it. So it is seriously a foreign matter when it's coming into your body. So let's talk about what are the new unexpected effects and health risks posed by genetic engineering. The first one is toxicity. So, genetically engineered foods are inherently unstable. Each insertion of a novel gene and the accompanying cassette of promoters, an antibiotic marker system, and vectors is random. Genetically engineering food producers simply do not know where their genetic cassette is being inserted in the food, nor do they know enough about the genetic chemical makeup of foods to establish a safe place for such an insertion. As a result, each gene insertion into a food amounts to plain food safety roulette, with the companies hoping that the new genetic material does not destabilize a safe food and make it hazardous. Each genetic insertion creates the added possibility that formerly non toxic elements in the food could become toxic. The FDA was well aware of the genetic instability problem prior to establishing their no testing policy. FDA scientists warned that this problem could create dangerous toxins in food and was a significant health risk. The scientists specifically warned that the genetic engineering of foods could result in increased levels of known naturally occurring toxicants, appearance of new, not previously identified toxicants, and an increased capability of concentrating toxic substance from the environment. Some examples are pesticides or heavy metals. These same FDA scientists recommended that long term toxicology tests be required prior to the marketing of genetically modified foods. FDA officials also were aware that safety testing on the first genetically engineered food, a tomato, had shown that consumption of this product resulted in stomach lesions in laboratory rats. FDA's response to the potentially toxicity problem with genetically engineered foods was to ignore it. They disregarded their own scientists, the clear scientific evidence, and the deaths and illnesses already attributed to this problem. The agency refused to require pre market toxicology testing for genetically modified foods or any toxicity monitoring. The FDA made these decisions with no scientific basis and without public notice and comment or independent scientific review. The agency's actions can only be seen as a shameful acquiescence to industry pressure and a complete abandonment of its responsibility to assure food safety. And I know for a long time, especially when like GMO conversation first was coming up, that a lot of people were debating, you know, why do you care? It has to be safe. They said it's okay. And so it's just interesting after doing the research, even though it's something that I wouldn't say passionate, but aware of for a long time, to the point where I made sure that I wanted to feed my family a certain way just because it just didn't seem right with the science that I understood about what was going on. But now, we kind of have the proof here that there was a lack of testing and a lack of wanting to make sure that these things were safe. I'm sure they had their reasons on why they wanted to do it for, product production, but just the fact that we know that there's toxins being caused by the changes that they've made to the food. And then, of course, now it's probably too late for them to, say, "Oh yeah, we were wrong," or "Yeah, this is what's going on now, so we can fix it." So unfortunately, it comes down to you as a consumer being aware of what's happening. And none of this is to make it be something that you're afraid of, or, "Oh my gosh, I can't eat any food anymore," because there's always ways around, what we choose to eat and how we eat. And so it just really is for the knowledge and for the information so that you can make the best decisions that you need to make for you and your family. The next category of potential human health concerns and some of the unexpected effects is allergic reactions. So, the genetic engineering of food creates two separate and serious health risks involving allergenicity. So, basically, allergies. The first is that genetic engineering can transfer allergens from foods to which people know they are allergic to foods that they think are safe. This risk is not hypothetical. A study by the New England Journal of Medicine showed that when a gene from a Brazil nut was engineered into soybeans, people allergic to nuts had serious reactions to the engineered product. At least one food, a Pioneer hybrid international soybean, was abandoned because of this problem. Without labeling, people with known food allergies have no way of avoiding the potentially serious health consequences of eating a genetically modified food containing hidden allergic material. There is another allergy risk associated with genetically modified foods, and these foods could be creating thousands of different and new allergic responses. Each genetic cassette being engineered into foods contains a number of novel proteins, and these are in the form of altered genes, bacteria, viruses, promoters, marker systems, and vectors, which have never been part of the human diet. So each of these numerous novel proteins could create an allergic response in some consumers. The FDA was also aware of this new and potentially massive allergenicity problem, but the agency's scientists repeatedly warned that genetic engineering could produce a new protein allergen. And once again, the agency's own scientists urged long term testing. However, the FDA again ignored its own scientists. Because these foods were allowed to be marketed without mandatory testing for this kind of allergenicity, millions of unsuspecting consumers have continuously been exposed to a potentially serious health risk. This FDA action is especially negligent in that the potential consequences of food allergies can include sudden death, and the most significantly affected population is children. The next category is antibiotic resistance. So, another hidden risk of genetically modified foods is that they could make disease causing bacteria resistant to current antibiotics, resulting in a significant increase in the spread of infectious infections and diseases in the human population. Virtually all genetically engineered foods contain antibiotic resistance markers, which helps the producers identify whether the new genetic material has actually been transformed into the host food. FDA's large scale introduction of these antibiotic marker genes into the food supply could render important antibiotics useless in fighting human diseases. For example, a genetically engineered maize plant includes an ampicillin resistant gene. An ampicillin is a valuable antibiotic used to treat a variety of infections in people and animals. A number of European countries, including Britain, refused to permit this particular corn to be grown due to health concerns that the ampicillin resistance gene could move from the corn into bacteria in the food chain, making ampicillin far less effective in fighting a worldwide range of bacterial infections. So again, the FDA officials have ignored their own scientists' concerns over the antibiotic resistance problem. Meanwhile, the British Medical Association, the MBA, addressed this problem in its own study of genetically modified foods. The MBA's conclusion was unequivocal. There should be a ban on the use of antibiotic resistant marker genes in genetically modified food, as the risk to human health from antibiotic resistance developing in microorganisms is one of the major public health threats that will be faced in the 21st century. The next category is immune suppression. The well respected medical journal, the Lancet, published an important study conducted by a doctor that under a grant from the Scottish government, the study examined the effect on rats of the consumption of potatoes genetically engineered to contain the biopesticide Bacillus, and this other word I'm not sure I can say, Thurogenesis, and BT for short. The scientists found that the rats consuming genetically altered potatoes showed significant detrimental effects on organ development, body metabolism, and immune function. And those three things in our bodies are very important. So it's unfortunate that those things happen to the rats and therefore are indicative of what could happen to our human bodies. The biotechnology industry launched a major attack on this doctor's study, and however, they have as yet not produced a single study of their own to refuse his findings. Moreover, 22 leading scientists recently declared that animal tests resulting linking genetically engineered foods to immune suppressions are valid. So there's a lot of testing going on and it's showing the same thing, but they're not putting that out there for the general public to know. So, unfortunately, there is definitely some immune suppression going on if you are consuming genetically modified products. The fifth category is cancer. Along with its approval of genetically modified foods, the FDA in 1993 also approved the use of genetically engineered recombinant bovine growth hormone. You've probably seen this before labeled on products. It has a small little r, big B, big G, big H, used to induce dairy cows to produce more milk. At the time, the FDA assured consumers that milk was safe. Since then, however, regulatory bodies in both Canada and Europe have rejected the drug, citing numerous animal and human health concerns. Perhaps the most immediate concern for consumers is that research shows that the levels of a hormone called insulin like growth factor, IGF 1, are increased in dairy products produced from cows treated with RBGH. So, what this is saying is that if you are drinking milk or any product, dairy product that comes from cows that are treated with RBGH, it is going to increase your IGF, which is your insulin like growth factor in your body. Now, without going into a lot of detail, which of course I would love to do, but we don't have time for, um, this is not something we want to be messing with. This affects humans in a lot of ways that are not um, happy results, not things that people want to have affected. If you're if you have excess of this, you can have it's going to cause obesity. It's going to cause some things to grow um, larger, so more like out of proportion, like hands and feet. It can affect the sex organs of men and women in different ways. And again, without going into a lot of detail, it's just not something we want to be messing with. So the fact that they're treating, genetically engineered um, the hormone that they're putting into these dairy products or into the cows to cause them to have more milk production for good reasons, right? They want to have more milk so they can make more money and sell it. But unfortunately, the downfall is how it's affecting us, those of us that are drinking it. And so um, the Canadians and Europeans further found that the FDA had completely failed to consider a study which showed that the increased IGF 1 in RBGH milk could survive digestion and make its way into the intestines and bloodstreams of consumers. These findings are significant because numerous studies now demonstrate that IGF is an important factor in the growth of breast cancer, prostate cancer, and colon cancer. The last category is loss of nutrition. Genetically engineering can also alter the nutritional value of food. In 1992, the FDA's Division of Food Chemistry and Technology and Food Contaminants Chemistry examined the problem of nutrient loss in genetically modified foods. The scientists involved specifically warned the agency that the genetic engineering of foods could result in undesirable alteration in the level of nutrients of such foods. They further noted that these nutritional changes may escape breeders' attention unless genetically engineered plants are evaluated specifically for these changes. Once again, the FDA ignored findings by their own scientists and never subjected the foods to mandatory government testing of any sort. So, this could be the result and reason why, if there is someone that independently tests foods and notices that, like I said earlier, like 20 years ago, they had tested the nutrients that were found in an apple, for example, and that's what we list, when you look up something online and you want to know what kind of nutrients you're getting from it. But then if they were to test one today, they're finding, wait a minute, it's totally off, it's totally different. And this is a big reason why. Besides the soil depletion of nutrients, the genetically modifying components of the food itself is causing there to be a loss of nutritional value. So, some genetically modified fats to avoid would be corn oil, cottonseed oil, palm and palm kernel oil, and soybean oil. If you're buying a product, typically like a processed product, something that's boxed, packaged, and you can look on the label, you can look to make sure it doesn't have these oils. Often, a lot of these oils are also used at restaurants. So, unfortunately, unless you know what they're cooking with there's a chance that you could be being exposed to these fats. Now, if you're cooking your food at home, you don't usually use these type of oils. There's a lot of other ones that are really easy to access and they're really good for you. And so sometimes the answer is doing more cooking at home. Um, there's also a list of the clean 15 foods, which are the least chemically contaminated produce, and the dirty dozen, which is the foods that have the most pesticides found on them. We'll start with those ones. These are foods that you should typically look for being organic just for the sake of not being exposed to the amounts of pesticides that these particular foods have on them. And that would be strawberries, spinach, kale or collard greens, peaches, pears, nectarines, apples, grapes, bell or hot peppers, cherries, blueberries, and green beans. And then there's the clean 15 are foods that are the least chemically contaminated. So if you had to choose not to get them organic, you could feel good about it. And that would be avocados, sweet corn, pineapple, onions, papaya, sweet peas, asparagus, honeydew melon, kiwi, cabbage, mushrooms, mangoes, sweet potato, watermelon, and carrots. So I know this has been a lot of information. And like I said earlier, I really hope that it's not the kind of information that is depressing or gets you down. I was really hoping that I could educate and put some knowledge out there to where you could just be more aware when you're shopping at the grocery store. Obviously, if you have access to something like a food co-op that gets things from local farmers, or if you have farmers markets or those kinds of things in your area, there's always a possibility that you could have access to some things that are even cleaner. You can have conversations directly with the farmers if that's the type of thing that's available in your area, and ask them about their practices. But there are lots of products and things that can be bought at stores that you can use to prepare your meals. Lots of whole ingredients, vegetables, lots of organic frozen vegetables, and frozen fruits and things. And there's more and more um, products that are available organic, and lots of ones that are labeled non-GMO. So it's not an endless fight right now that you can't win. There are many choices and ways that you can provide better quality products for your family, and do it in a way that doesn't necessarily cost more. There are times that some of the choices could, but then you just need to decide if it's important enough to you. There are enough side effects and problems, I believe, that come from ingesting these foreign matters and chemicals and toxins that cause inflammation. And we know inflammation causes disease down the road. And so it's just one step that you can be in control of so that you don't have the effects later in your life from consuming things that are toxic. So I hope this has helped you today, and I wish you all of the best of luck in your journey with your health. To be your healthiest self, join me each week as we talk about a new topic that can help you, your family, and your loved ones in your life to be your healthiest self.